She walked down the aisle in her sister's name, wearing a stranger's perfume and a borrowed smile, marrying a blind millionaire who didn't know he was being lied to, and yet somehow he was the only one who ever truly saw her. Hello family, welcome to True Life Stories. Please subscribe and leave a like for us, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The satin of the wedding gown whispered as it was forced over Valeria's trembling shoulders, the cold weight of it dragging against her skin like a chain disguised in luxury. The silk was still warm from the steamer, but it might as well have been dipped in ice. Her mother's hands, so rigid and purposeful, tugged and pinned with the practiced aggression of someone who didn't ask but demanded. "Stand still," her mother snapped. "Celeste isn't coming. You have no choice." Valeria's eyes flickered up to the mirror. What stared back was a ghost of herself, powdered, sculpted, reshaped into her sister's image. Her hair was pinned in the exact way Celeste used to wear it for press photos, her lips stained in the crimson shade called fame, and not a single strand or smear out of place. She looked nothing like herself. That girl in the mirror didn't stutter when nervous, didn't cry herself to sleep, didn't dream of open fields or quiet libraries. She looked like someone else's bride. The room buzzed with chaos. Assistants scurried around like bees on espresso, their hushed voices full of panic, their heels clacking on marble tile. A wedding coordinator banged on the door for the 5th time. 10 minutes. Please, she needs to be ready. She's ready, her mother called back without turning, yanking the veil into place with a satisfying snap. Valeria swallowed hard. Her mouth tasted like dust and sugar. "Celeste doesn't want this," she whispered. Her mother's eyes narrowed. "And what Celeste wants is no longer relevant." She ran. "You didn't. I didn't agree. You owe me." Her mother's voice cut like glass. "You've lived in this house, fed off this family's name, worn shoes bought with money you didn't earn. Now you'll pay us back." Valeria blinked, tears welling. "By marrying a stranger?" "By saving us," her mother corrected. "Lucien Drake is not just a man. He's a legacy. He's blind, not stupid. If this wedding falls apart, we'll lose the contract, the estate. Do you want that?" At the door, Celeste leaned against the frame, arms folded, her sculpted face carved in apathy, as if she were attending her own sister's downfall as a guest. "You always wanted to play dress up," Celeste said, voice sweet with venom. "Well, now's your chance. Go be the bride." Valeria turned away, heart thudding like a war drum. "This is wrong," she murmured, more to herself than anyone. "Wrong," her mother echoed, incredulous. "The dress is steamed. The press is outside. The priest is waiting. If you don't walk down that aisle, you'll ruin everything." The door opened. A butler in white gloves appeared, nodding once. "They're ready for the bride." Valeria stood frozen, the veil trembling in the draft. Her mother stepped behind her, whispering so only she could hear. "Smile. Cameras are on you the moment you step out. You're Celeste now. Do not embarrass us." Her feet moved before her mind agreed. Out the dressing room, down the hallway lined with gold-framed portraits, onto the marble steps of St. Vincent's Cathedral. The organ had started. The guests had risen. 1,000 eyes bore down, expecting Celeste, the heiress, the showpiece. Instead, they got Valeria, the shadow dressed in white. At the end of the aisle stood Lucien Drake, tall and statuesque in a midnight black suit, his face calm, head tilted just slightly like he was listening to the air itself. He could not see her. Not with his eyes. But something in him shifted. His brow furrowed. His lips parted faintly. She took one step forward, then another. The gown dragged like it disapproved. She tried not to look at the stained glass saints above, their eternal eyes judging. When she reached him, the silence bloomed. The minister spoke, his voice echoing into the vastness. "Celeste Quinn, do you take Lucien Drake to be your lawful husband, in honor, in love, and in duty, until death do you part?" That wasn't her real name. Her mother, seated in the front row, gave a single nod. Celeste smirked. "Aye." Her voice cracked, her throat parched. I do. Lucien's head tilted again. His voice, quiet and precise, sliced through the silence. Why are you shaking? She froze. Are you afraid I'll see you? He wasn't smiling. He wasn't joking. And for a moment, it was as if he had seen her. The thunderous applause rose, cameras clicked, confetti prepared to fall. But all Valeria could hear was the sound of her breath, shallow and foreign. And she smiled, not out of joy, but because she was being watched. And because now it was far too late to turn back. Lucien Drake did not need to see the faces of the guests to feel their curiosity. He stood still, posture straight, hands folded lightly in front of him, breathing in the scents and the tension that filled St. Vincent's Cathedral. The heady perfume of lilies. The waxy sweetness of too many candles burning too long. The brush of rustling fabric as strangers fidgeted in their pews. It was all theater, glorious, orchestrated theater. And something was off in the script. She was late. Not by much, but enough. Enough to make his instincts, long sharpened by a world he could not see, begin to murmur. His sight had vanished 7 years ago in an accident that stripped him of light, but amplified everything else. Every sound, every silence. The air shifted when people lied. The floor creaked differently when someone hesitated. So when the soft footsteps began down the aisle, he caught them immediately. These were not Celeste's steps. He'd memorized hers, sharp, purposeful, and a touch too fast, like she was always late for something more important than him. This woman, whoever she was, walked as if each step cost her a decision. Her shoes tapped delicately, like she feared the echo might reveal her secrets. She wasn't gliding. She was carrying something, weight, doubt, maybe guilt. Lucien tilted his head slightly, drawing in a breath as she neared. The perfume was different. Celeste wore jasmine, bold and floral, a scent that announced itself before she entered the room. This was softer, warmer, vanilla and sandalwood, the kind of scent that whispered rather than shouted. His fingers flexed at his side. Something in his chest stirred, not alarm, not yet, but attention. When the priest asked her name, there was hesitation. Celeste Quinn. A pause, then the words, I do, delivered like a confession rather than a vow. Lucien's brow tensed, and he turned his head toward her ever so slightly. Why are you shaking? He asked softly, barely loud enough for anyone else to hear. His lips barely moved. Are you afraid I'll see you? She didn't answer. Not with words. But he felt her breath catch. A single inhale, sharp and high, like the air itself betrayed her. He didn't press further. Not then. The applause rose. The cameras clicked. Somewhere far above, organ pipes groaned out a jubilant march. Someone threw rose petals that brushed against his coat like faint memories. But Lucien wasn't listening to any of that. He was listening to her. When they exited the cathedral, her arm was hooked into his. Lightly. Too lightly. Celeste always gripped like she was dragging him forward. This one she barely touched him. As if she didn't believe she belonged there. In the car, silence reigned. The kind of silence that speaks. Lucien turned his head slightly, facing the space where he knew her to be. You're very quiet. Her breath hitched. It's been a long day. So it wasn't Celeste's usual sharpness. That much was clear. You sound different than on the phone, he murmured, turning his wedding ring slowly on his finger. She hesitated again. I had a cold last week. I guess it changed my voice a little. He nodded, but he didn't believe her. Lucien wasn't interested in voices. Voices could lie. He focused on cadence, phrasing, the tiny inconsistencies that slipped out when people tried too hard to sound natural. This woman, this bride, was performing. But for whom? For the guests? For herself? For him? He shifted in his seat, turning his face toward the window, though all he saw was the endless black he'd lived in for years. I wonder, he said calmly, what people would do if no one could see them. Who would they become? She didn't answer, and he didn't expect her to. The rest of the ride was silence. But Lucien was listening, and what he heard was everything she wasn't saying. The gates of the Drake estate opened without a sound, swinging wide like the arms of a secret waiting to be kept. Valeria sat in the back of the black car beside Lucien, her gloved hands curled tightly in her lap. She hadn't spoken in 10 minutes. Not since they left the cathedral. Not since she lied into 1,000 cameras and said, "I do," to a man who didn't know her name. The estate unfurled before them like something out of a modern Gothic novel. Vast stretches of manicured lawn, a marble fountain in the shape of a weeping angel, and the looming silhouette of the manor, a blend of stone and glass, luxury and lineage. Everything about it whispered. Wealth. Not the loud new money kind, but the old cold kind, the kind that was inherited, not earned. The kind that reminded her, even as the bride, she was an outsider. The car slowed to a stop under the arched entrance. A butler opened her door before she even reached for the handle. "Welcome home, Mrs. Drake." Mrs. Drake. The name felt like a collar, one she hadn't chosen to wear. She stepped out into the dusk light, the hem of her dress brushing the cobblestone as Lucien followed. He moved with a grace that surprised her, navigating the steps without hesitation, his cane tucked under one arm like an afterthought. For a man without sight, he moved like someone who didn't need it. Inside, the manor swallowed her whole. The floors gleamed with polished wood so perfect they reflected the chandelier light above. Tall windows stretched to the high ceilings, draped in velvet. Oil paintings of dead men stared down at her from gold frames. Their expressions judged her. No one greeted her with warmth. Not the housekeeper. Not the chef. Not the drivers or the maids who passed her with brief nods and curious, sidelong glances. They all looked at her like something was off. As if Celeste had returned broken. Lucien's assistant, a middle-aged man named Devon with sharp eyes and a voice like sandpaper, stepped forward, giving her a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Drake's room is prepared, as always," he said. Then, with a slight glance at Valeria, "And we've made arrangements for Mrs. Drake's quarters as requested." Lucien tilted his head. "Thank you, Devon. That will be all." Valeria opened her mouth. "Quarters?" Lucien turned toward her, the faintest smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You don't have to sleep beside me, if that's what you're wondering." Her face flushed. "I wasn't." "Good," he said, walking past her. "Because I wasn't asking." She stood there for a beat, alone in a palace of strangers, until a maid approached and gestured politely. "Mrs. Drake? I'll show you to your rooms." Rooms. Plural. The words echoed. Her suite was beautiful. Cream and gold tones. A balcony that overlooked the gardens. A reading nook by the window. A closet already filled with designer clothes in her size. Some still had Celeste's name stitched into the tags. She didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, she wandered to the vanity, where a single note sat on the mirror. "Be perfect. Love, Mother." She tore it in half. The first night passed like a slow suffocation. She didn't eat dinner with Lucien. He hadn't asked. She spent hours pacing the room, touching objects that didn't belong to her, brushing her fingertips over marble, glass, silk, gold, trying to find a reason to feel real. The next morning, she found herself in the breakfast room, a sun-drenched space with too many windows and one long table that could seat 20. She sat at the end, alone. Lucien entered 15 minutes later, dressed in black and unbothered. "I trust the room suits you," he said, pouring his own coffee with unnerving precision. "It's beautiful." "That's not what I asked." She looked up. "It suits me fine." He smiled, but not kindly. "Good. You'll be here a while." The days blurred after that. Lucien kept to his schedule. Morning meetings in his study, calls with investors, long walks in the garden with Devon trailing behind, reading in the library until dusk. He spoke little unless spoken to. And yet Valeria felt watched. Not in a cruel way, but observed. Studied. She passed him once on the staircase, and he turned his head slightly, listening. "You hold your breath when you lie," he said casually. She stopped mid-step. "Excuse me. That's what you did when you said you were fine. You held your breath." She didn't reply. Just kept walking. But she exhaled the moment she turned the corner. The manor became her maze. Every hallway led to questions. Every room was a reminder of the woman she was pretending to be. She passed by portraits of Lucien's ancestors and wondered what they'd think if they knew the bride was a decoy. By the end of the week, she understood the truth of this life. She had married into a kingdom, yes, but not as a queen. She was a trespasser. And every smile, every silence, every gaze Lucien turned her way reminded her just how gilded a cage could be. The first time he asked her to read to him, it wasn't a request. It was an invitation carefully dressed as indifference. Valeria had found him in the library after dinner, sitting in the leather chair by the fire, the flames casting shadows that flickered over the angles of his face. He looked almost like a portrait, still, dark-suited, collar unbuttoned, a glass of something expensive in one hand. A closed book sat on the table beside him. He traced the spine slowly with his fingers. "Would you read to me?" he asked without turning his head. "I'm told it's a waste to own a library like this and not use it." Valeria hovered at the edge of the room like a ghost in borrowed skin. What book?" "You choose." Her hand hesitated over titles as she scanned the shelves. The room smelled like old paper and leather polish, the kind of scent that wrapped itself around memories. Her fingers landed on a thin hardcover bound in navy cloth. Rilke, Letters to a Young Poet. She crossed the room and sat in the smaller chair across from him, the book balanced in her lap. She cleared her throat. Lucien tilted his head slightly toward the sound, as if tuning an instrument. She began. "Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart." Her voice stumbled at first, uncertain, caught between fear and formality. But as she continued, her tone smoothed, carried by rhythm and thought. She read with soft inflection, untrained but honest. The kind of voice that didn't try to impress, only to understand. Lucien said nothing as she read. He didn't shift, didn't interrupt. But he listened. She could tell by the small changes in his face, a lift of an eyebrow here, a subtle exhale there. He wasn't just hearing the words. He was receiving them, as if he'd carved out a space in the dark just for this moment. When she reached the final line, her voice grew quiet. "Live the questions now. Perhaps you will then gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer." Silence settled between them like a warm weight. Lucien finally spoke, voice low. Celeste would never have chosen Rilke. Valeria's breath caught. Her hands tightened around the book. She thought poetry was indulgent, he added. She preferred biographies. Men with power. Kings, dictators, captains of industry. She once told me feelings are for people who don't have plans. He turned his face slightly toward her. "But you read like someone who feels." Valeria looked down at her lap. Her heart was suddenly too loud. She stood quickly. "I should go. It's late." "Come back tomorrow," he said before she could reach the door. She turned, surprised. "To read?" "To be heard," he said simply. "You have a voice worth listening to." That night, she stood on her balcony long after midnight, staring into the garden below. The moon lit up the hedges like marble sculptures. Somewhere in the branches something fluttered, maybe a bird, maybe her conscience. She hadn't intended to come back the next night. But she did. And the night after that. She read him Neruda, Wolfe Baldwin. He sat quietly, always in the same chair, sipping slowly from a glass he never finished. Some nights they spoke afterward, about the books, about the world. Sometimes he asked about her past. She dodged where she could, invented when she had to. He never pried. But he never believed her lies either. Once, during a reading of a passage on longing, she paused. "Why are you stopping?" he asked. "I don't like the ending." "Then read it differently," he said. And so she did. On the 7th night, he asked, "Why do you hide your laugh?" Valeria blinked. "I don't." "You do. You always stop yourself halfway. Like someone told you once it was too loud." Her lips curled. Maybe someone did. Lucien leaned forward slightly. "You don't have to shrink to fit here. I'm already blind. You won't disappear if you make a sound." She looked at him. This man she was supposed to deceive, supposed to forget. Instead, she found herself memorizing the shape of his words. The patience in his listening. The strange ache in his quiet. Each night after, she stayed a little longer. Not because she was forced to, but because in the library, under low firelight and between the lines of borrowed books, she was not Celeste. Not a fraud. Not an obligation. She was Valeria, and Lucien, though blind, was beginning to see her. It began with a name. A simple thing. Breath and syllable. But when Lucien said it softly, deliberately, Valeria, it cleaved the air like a blade. She froze, one hand hovering over the teacup she'd just set in front of him. They were in the garden that morning, seated beneath a domed gazebo ringed in ivy. Late spring sunlight filtered through the leaves, dappling the tablecloth and the porcelain. A breeze stirred the edge of her skirt. Her heart nearly leapt out of her throat. "I'm sorry," she asked too quickly. Lucien tilted his head. He wore the same calm expression, unreadable as always. But his hand, resting near the sugar bowl, had gone still. "I said," he repeated, "thank you, Valeria." Her name again. Not Celeste. Not the role. Her. She swallowed, trying to disguise the tremor in her voice. "You meant to say Celeste." "Did I?" She set the spoon down with care, the metal clicking too loud against the china. "You're mistaken." Lucien didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He simply leaned back, the corners of his mouth barely curving. "You walk differently," he said. Her pulse skipped. "You speak slower," he added. "You breathe like someone who's constantly holding something back." Celeste never held anything back. She took space. She claimed it. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do." He turned his face toward the sunlight, letting the warmth pass over his skin. "Did you think I wouldn't notice?" Valeria gripped the edge of the table. She had kept the mask on so long it had almost fused with her skin. But now it felt like it was cracking from within. Her heart pounded in her ears, louder than the wind in the hedges, louder than the distant call of birds. "Why haven't you said anything until now?" she asked. "Because I wanted to know who you were beneath the lie." His answer came too quickly, too easily. He'd known. He'd known for days. Maybe longer. "You never called me out. You were already punishing yourself," he said simply. "What could I say that would wound you more than you already had?" Valeria looked away, jaw tight, eyes stinging. "You must hate me." "No," he said. "I hate that someone made you believe deception was the only way you'd be loved." She couldn't breathe. The shame flooded her chest, thick and hot and ancient. Her mother's voice echoed like a ghost. "You owe us." Celeste's laughter. The weight of expectation wrapped around her like barbed wire. "I was going to tell you," she whispered. "After the contract. After the signatures. After." She couldn't finish. Lucien nodded. "And then you'd disappear. Quietly. As if you never existed." She met his face, still, composed, blind eyes fixed on nothing. And yet, she felt seen more deeply than she ever had in her life. "I thought it would be easier," she said. "To vanish." "You underestimate your presence," Lucien murmured. "Your absence would have left a mark." Silence lingered between them. Then, "Does anyone else know?" "No," she said. "Not yet. But they will." Valeria's lips pressed together. "Celeste will come back. She'll ruin everything. That's what she does." Lucien's smile this time was colder. "Let her try." Valeria blinked. "You don't sound surprised." "I'm not." Celeste always had perfect timing. When to show up for a camera, and when to disappear just long enough to make others scramble. He stood slowly, gracefully. "No cane today. Just memory guiding his steps." "I don't care what she does," he said. "And what about me?" Her voice was fragile now. "Honest." Lucien turned toward her, and for a long moment, the only sound between them was wind through the ivy. "I haven't decided," he said. And with that, he walked away, leaving her in the garden, heart fractured, mask in pieces at her feet. It was just past midnight when she knocked on his door. Not the guest suite she'd been living in, not the grand hall or the silent, watchful library, but his door. The house was asleep. Not a single footstep on the marble, not a single voice echoing through the endless halls. Just the sound of her breathing, shallow and hesitant, and her knuckles against dark oak. Lucien opened the door without hesitation. He was in a charcoal robe, loosely tied at the waist. Barefoot. His face was unreadable. Not surprised. Not suspicious. Only still. Valeria stood in a cotton nightgown, her fingers clenched around the edge of her sleeve, eyes ringed in fatigue and something deeper. Something worn raw. "I can't sleep," she said softly. He nodded once, then stepped aside. The room was dim, lit only by the fireplace in the corner. The flames cast gentle shapes across the walls and ceiling, like memories dancing in the shadows. The bed behind him remained untouched. A book lay open on a table. A single chair by the fire. She walked in and stopped. There was no script for this part. No lines rehearsed. Lucien didn't offer her a seat. She didn't ask for one. They stood, facing one another, the silence between them a live thing. She spoke first. "I lied to you." He nodded just once. "I know." Her throat tightened. "About everything. The wedding. My name. Who I am. You're Valeria." She blinked. "But you said." "I listen." He turned his face slightly toward the fire, the flickering glow catching the edge of his jawline. "Every night in that library. You weren't pretending. You were you. And I've never met Celeste in all the years I knew her. Not really. But you." He paused. "You meant every word you read." Valeria stepped closer. "I never wanted to be part of it. The lie. I didn't choose this." He looked toward her now. His eyes, though blind, found her with more precision than sight ever could. "I believe you." She took a breath and spoke the words that had weighed on her chest since the first time she said, "I do," under a false name. "My mother made the decision. Celeste ran the night before. She left without a word. I was in the room when the dress arrived. And she told me, no, ordered me to put it on. That I owed her. That if I didn't do it, we'd lose everything. The house. The business. The reputation." Lucien didn't interrupt. He listened with the kind of stillness only people who lived in silence could master. "I didn't agree. But I didn't stop it either. I became her voice for 6 months. I answered your calls. I memorized her tone. Her laugh. I wore her perfume. I wore her. And somewhere in the middle of pretending, I forgot how to stop." A log shifted in the fireplace, the wood cracking softly like applause for a confession finally spoken aloud. She looked down. "I was supposed to leave after the wedding. Vanish. Let the contract hold. Let you forget me. But you didn't," he said. "No." "Why?" Her eyes welled. "Because I saw you." Lucien didn't speak. Didn't move. "I saw the way you spoke to me. The way you listened. You never once treated me like something bought or inherited. I felt seen. And the terrible irony is," she laughed, but it came out broken, "you're the one who can't see me at all." He stepped forward. 1 step. Then 2. She didn't back away. Lucien raised a hand slowly, and with a reverence that silenced her breath, he reached out. His fingertips found her cheek, traced the line of her jaw, the slope of her neck. Not possessive. Not testing. Learning. "You're not a lie," he said. "But I'm not what you were promised." "I don't want what I was promised," he replied. "I want what's true." The words dropped like a stone in her chest, sinking to the place where hope had lived quietly all this time. Her voice cracked again. "Do you forgive me?" Lucien took her other hand, lifting it slowly between them. "I haven't decided." The honesty stung. "And yet it soothed." "But I haven't let you go either, have I?" he added. "No." They stood like that for a moment, their shadows merging on the floor. And when he spoke next, it was almost a whisper. "Stay." Not as a command. As a choice. She nodded, silent tears slipping down her cheek. And that night, as the fire burned low and the dark folded itself around them, they did not kiss. They did not undress. They simply sat side by side, 2 broken truths leaning into one another. And for the first time in years, perhaps ever, Valeria slept in peace. She arrived in stilettos. Not a call, not a warning, not even a whisper of her name days before. Just the high, familiar click of heels on marble echoing through the Drake estate one quiet afternoon. A sound like thunder to Valeria's ears, even though the sky outside was clear. Lucien was in the music room, hands tracing the edge of a grand piano, when Devon stepped in and cleared his throat with unusual stiffness. "There's a guest," he said. Lucien's fingers froze mid-key. Valeria had already risen from the sunroom where she'd been sketching. Another small thing she'd found the courage to do since the night of her confession. She knew. Before she even saw her. She knew. Celeste stood at the bottom of the staircase like a storm-given form. Sunglasses pushed high into sleek hair, lips painted sharp red, a trench coat draped across her shoulders like royalty. She looked like someone who hadn't suffered a single consequence for what she'd done. She never had. "Well," Celeste said, arms crossed. "Isn't this charming?" Valeria didn't speak. Her stomach turned to stone. Her legs threatened to buckle. Celeste's eyes swept the foyer like a cat surveying its territory. "You've been playing house for quite a while, dear sister." Lucien stepped forward from behind Valeria. "Celeste." She smiled, that camera-ready grin, false as diamonds in moonlight. "Lucien, I see the rumors were true. My replacement does make a lovely little ornament." "Bravo." "You should leave," he said calmly. Celeste let out a soft, incredulous laugh. "Leave? Darling, this house still has my initials etched in the stone outside. My name is in the family contract. My face, my brand, was the one attached to every deal your company negotiated over the last 6 months." "You're not part of my company," Lucien replied, voice steely. "No, but I'm part of your life," she snapped, suddenly feral beneath the gloss. "Or have you forgotten how this marriage was arranged? Do I need to remind you who the real bride was supposed to be?" "I haven't forgotten anything," he said, stepping closer. "Especially not the silence, the disappearance, the abandonment." Celeste's expression flickered, just for a second. Then she masked it with a smirk. "I was reevaluating." Valeria found her voice, but it came out like breath through broken glass. "You left." Celeste turned to her, eyes narrowing. "And you stepped in like a good little puppet. Tell me, how long did you rehearse my laugh? My perfume? My signature? I bet Mother was just thrilled." "I didn't want this," Valeria said. "Don't flatter yourself," Celeste snapped. "You've always wanted what I had. Now you've got it, and you think you're owed love on top of it." "She didn't take it from you," Lucien said, voice cold. "You gave it up. You left it on the floor with your gown and your name." Celeste's mouth tightened. "So what? Now you're in love with the substitute." Silence. Valeria froze. Lucien didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned toward her. Really turned, his head tilted slightly, like he was studying the heat behind her silence. And then, "I see her," he said. Celeste blinked. "She's not me." "No," he said. "She's better." The words cut deep. Not just into Celeste, but into Valeria, too. Because they were too much. Too sharp. Too kind. Too dangerous. Celeste stepped forward, her voice lower now, calculated. "You realize what happens if this gets out? You think the board, the public, the press will forgive a marriage based on a lie? This wasn't just a wedding, it was an alliance. And if I decide to speak..." Lucien's voice was deadly calm. "Then you'll expose your own family's deception. Your own mother's manipulation. You'll show the world that you ran, and your sister had more honor than you ever did." Celeste's mask cracked. Just slightly. She turned her attention back to Valeria, eyes narrowing like blades. "You're a fool if you think this lasts. He'll grow tired of you. And when he does, you won't even have a name worth remembering." Valeria didn't flinch. "Not this time. I'm not trying to be remembered," she said. "I'm just trying to be honest." Celeste stared at her for a long moment. Something unreadable passed between them. Then, like fog dissipating, she laughed. Lightly. Almost convincingly. "Well," she said, smoothing her coat. "Enjoy your little fairy tale, sister. I always preferred tragedies anyway." She turned and walked out, heels tapping like a closing gavel. The doors closed behind her with the soft click of finality. Lucien and Valeria stood in the silence she left behind, hearts beating too loudly in their chests. "She'll be back," Valeria whispered. "I know," Lucien said. "But next time I won't answer the door. It was raining the night Valeria stood beneath the archway of the rose garden, barefoot on stone, the scent of wet earth rising like a prayer. The storm had rolled in quietly, the way summer storms often do, clouds heavy with memory, thunder humming like the echo of old pain. The manor behind her glowed faintly through the mist, windows warm, inviting. But she stayed outside, hair damp, the hem of her dress soaked. She needed the cold. She needed the truth of it. Inside, Lucien waited, silent, unreadable, perhaps even undecided. It had been 4 days since Celeste left. 4 days without confrontation, without more lies, without contact. 4 days of silence between them. Not hostile, not cruel, just space, deliberate and careful. Valeria had spent those days waiting, for him to speak, to accuse, to forgive, to decide. But tonight, she decided not to wait. The door opened behind her. His footsteps were as quiet as ever. She didn't turn. "I thought you'd gone to bed," she said. Lucien's voice was steady, even softer in the rain. "I didn't want to sleep until I knew where you were." She turned to face him. His dark coat was wet at the shoulders. He hadn't brought an umbrella. "I wasn't running," she said quickly. "I just needed air." "I know." They stood in silence. "I meant what I said to Celeste," he added. "You're better." Valeria looked down. "You don't have to say that." "I don't have to do anything," Lucien said. "That's the point." She lifted her gaze. "Then why haven't you said anything since she left?" He exhaled slowly. "Because this wasn't about her anymore. It's about you. And what you want. I didn't want to speak until I knew you stayed because you chose to." "I didn't know I could choose," she whispered. "You always could," he said. The rain softened. A hush fell over the garden like a held breath. "I was never meant to be here," she said. "Not in this house. Not in this marriage. Not in your life." Lucien stepped closer. "You weren't meant for it. But you earned it." Her voice cracked. "But you didn't choose me either. Not at first." "No," he said. "But I do now." She blinked. "I know who you are, Valeria," he said. "I know the way you hesitate before you speak. The way you trace the edges of book pages like their skin. I know the sound of your voice when you're holding back laughter and the tremble in it when you're telling the truth." His hand reached out, open, not demanding. "I don't want the perfect woman. Or the powerful one. I want you. The one who stayed. The one who read to me like every word mattered. The one who never asked to be seen, but made herself unforgettable anyway." She looked at his hand. Rain slid down her cheeks, or maybe those were tears. "You don't need to marry me again," she said. "I know," he whispered. "But I'd like to ask you anyway." Her breath caught. And in that moment, in that garden, in that quiet, trembling breath between rain and resolve, Lucien got down on one knee. No audience. No cameras. No contract. Just him, kneeling on wet stone, his palm extended toward the one woman who had never tried to own him, only understand him. "Valeria Quinn," he said, "will you marry me for real this time? No lies. No names. Just us." Her voice was quiet. Fierce. "Yes." He smiled. And though his eyes would never see her, his hands found her face, and their kiss wasn't perfect, wasn't rehearsed, but it was true. Later that night, beneath soft blankets and firelight, she whispered something into the quiet. "Do you regret any of it?" Lucien reached for her hand beneath the sheets, fingers warm and certain. "No," he said, "because it led me to you." And with that, they slept not as strangers, not as actors in a lie, but as two people who had lost everything false and found something real. Love. Unseen. But not unfelt. A year later, the roses bloomed early that spring. Valeria stood in the garden with her hands in the soil, fingers stained with earth, lips curled in quiet satisfaction as she gently patted dirt around the base of a new white rosebush. She'd named this one truth. The name made Lucien smile. "You talk to the flowers more than me these days," he teased from the bench a few steps behind, his cane resting beside him, his legs crossed like a man who finally knew comfort in stillness. Valeria looked over her shoulder. "That's because they don't interrupt." Lucien laughed, really laughed, the sound low and rich and full. It still surprised her sometimes how much he laughed now. She dusted off her hands and walked to him, brushing bits of petal from her apron. "I have dirt in my hair, don't I?" she asked. He reached up, fingers moving gently through her waves, and pretended to frown. "Yes, but you're beautiful, earth-stained and all." "Liar." "True," he said, "but only about the dirt." They'd been married, really married, for 10 months now. No broadcast. No press. Just a small ceremony beneath the ivy-draped arch in the very garden where everything had unraveled the first time. Devon had cried. Lucien claimed not to believe him, but Valeria heard the sniffle. Their lives weren't dramatic anymore. Not really. They were filled with quieter things: morning tea, reading aloud on rainy nights, arguments over which bookshelf needed reorganizing, Lucien's habit of stealing her hand and tracing the lines on her palm whenever he was thinking. Sometimes they talked about the past. Sometimes they didn't. Celeste had vanished again, off to Europe last they heard. Their mother had tried to crawl back in, mask in place. Valeria had shut the door with the kind of calm she never thought she'd possess. She had grown roots here. Not just in Lucien's world, but her own. She painted again, tended the roses, wrote essays under her real name. And each night, without fail, Lucien would find her and say, "What did you feel today?" Not what she did, not what she achieved. What she felt. Because that's what mattered now. "Do you ever wonder," she asked as she sat beside him, "what would have happened if I'd said no the second time?" Lucien turned his head toward her, eyes closed but smile soft. "No," he said. "Why not?" "Because you didn't," he said, lacing their fingers together. "And every version of the story where you didn't say yes is less beautiful than this one." She rested her head on his shoulder. And in the scent of roses and soil, in the hush of evening and the comfort of hands intertwined, she knew. She was no longer the shadow in someone else's story. She had written her own. We have come to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.